Yeah.
So welcome to the third round of the IIT 2016. Without further ado, in order to open the case, the House calls upon the Prime Minister. Here.
Mr. Speaker, let us first understand that the Indian feminist movement is unique in a very important way. The fact that a lot of intersectionalities, be it caste, be it religion, have a significant bearing on the status of women and the treatment of women. So therefore, while patriarchy has affected all women in India, they have affected them in different ways. So therefore, as the Indian feminist movement, we would want them to imbibe the value of standing up to patriarchy in whichever context in which they face it, right? And that's why we believe that Kali is a very appropriate icon that we can have. So why does a movement need an icon? Let's answer that question. An icon does not need to be the representation of an ideal woman. It definitely does not need to be someone who is balanced in all respects. It needs to be someone who espouses a value that the movement considers dear and beneficial, right? And we believe that Kali does that. Let us look at the other kind of icons that the feminist movement has. Right? We have Sheryl Sandberg, who espouses this value that women are not only belonging to the houses, but they can and work and make a difference in the public sphere, right? You have Wonder Woman being selected as a goodwill ambassador, which does not mean that the Wonder Woman is a representation of the ideal woman or someone that everyone should be like, but it does mean that the value that she embodies, the idea of standing up to evil and making as big an impact as say Superman or Batman, is what we are trying to harp upon, right? So how does Kali, and fifth minute, Kali's story emphasize this? So let me give you a background on the story of Kali. So there was this time of this demon called Rakta whose widespread terror on earth was exemplified by the fact that no matter how many times you kill him, he can regenerate himself from a drop of blood. And here, when all the gods were helpless, this woman, this Ma Durga, who is usually revered as a symbol of motherhood and grace, she assumed the form of this raging goddess called Kali, who not only killed this demon, but also drank all the blood that comes out from him. Right? So the values that the story of Kali shows are very important, and those values have significant bearing on how women can react to the various forces of patriarchy they face in everyday life. Right? So the value that she says about how at times a picture like Ma Durga, who is so graceful, may have to descend and become Ma Kali, means that at some times, even if something might become ugly, you should not stop yourself from going ahead and pursuing it. And this we can see in the case of, say, sexual harassment in public transport, right? Where many women decide not to make a big issue of it because they think that things might get ugly. And women need to know that, need to be imparted this important value and ideal that you should not stay silent, right? This another value that Kali's story espouses is the role of women's contribution in society. She is not simply a support or an adjunct to the male member of the particular family, but in fact, she can play a very vital and strong role in public life. Here, the kind of the story that Kali portrays is that when all else failed, a woman came and saved the day. A woman had the power to do so. Kali is often identified as a symbol of women's power and women's strength, right? And those are very crucial values. But more importantly, let us ask the question of why we are focusing on Kali and not some secular or some other idea, some other kind of institute, some other kind of role model from any other source, right? Because let us try to understand that the lot of Indian patriarchy is rooted in religion. A Hindu woman is told that a lot of the practices that she has to face have their root in religious texts. So when Manusmriti comes and tells you that a woman's witness is necessarily less than that for man's, or the story of Sati tells you that the role of a wife is simply to be completely devout to the husband, it clearly shows that religious scriptures have a significant bearing on the treatment and the perception that women have of themselves. We believe that when we use this very important source, because we cannot, at present, we cannot disassociate and create this pool of secular-minded people who have no relevance to religion at all, right? Who have no relation to religion at all. We believe that we can tap their association to religious texts and scriptures when we propagate such a powerful woman who's coming out of those very religious scriptures, so that when a girl Hindu girl is told, for instance, that she should not go out or she should not be going out in public life and should focus on doing household work, she can resort to these very same images of strength and power to show that she can, right? So we have the idea of Bachendri Pal, the first Indian woman to climb the Mount Everest, who used to revere the goddess Durga and told her that how the image of Durga gave her strength to go ahead and go forth in her endeavors, right? So before I go on, any POIs?
The idea is that a large part of Indian patriarchy stems from religion. Tell us how glorifying a symbol of that very religion helps you in being able to question and fight that.
Alright, so we told you that because religion is such an innate part of Indian life, it means that any message that comes in through religion will have greater acceptability. And it is important to question the fact that once people see that the very religious text or the very source of religion which tells them that women are supposed to be devout have also this this idea of a powerful woman like Kali, it will be easier for them to engage with other representations or other kind of obligations that are imposed on them, right? But let us even talk about some other arguments they could have made, or perhaps they possibly will, right? The idea that this will alienate other religions, or this will alienate other kinds of women who do not associate with a powerful image or subscribe to more docile attitude in everyday life, right? Speaking about religion, let's talk about the fact that yes, we agree that perhaps a Muslim woman or a Christian woman may not derive the same amount of inspiration from seeing an image of Kali, for instance. But they will be prompted by this particular move to find similar female icons in their own past, in their own religion. And we don't think that the solution to having a solution to such a deeply multi-religious society like India is to have a sanitized secular symbol, because we don't think that sanitized secular symbol will simply have enough connect with the people in order to change their minds and opinions, right? So therefore we believe that having a religious icon like Kali is important. Secondly, let's talk about the idea that there might be some people who will be put off by the idea of portraying a woman as a strong woman because they don't personally identify with her. Here we bring you the idea of a countervailing discourse. For several centuries now, the majority of the discourse and 95% of all the people and all influences that a woman faces in her life tells her that she has to be docile, that she has to have a certain role in society. We believe that to counter that, we cannot counter it with a balanced, tailored for everyone image of a woman. We believe that the kind of value we need to present as a countervailing force has to be jarring, has to be explicit, exactly what the image of Kali provides, right? So we tell you that since there has been a dominant patriarchal narrative which trains women as docile and meek, we need something jarring like Kali in order to safeguard those women who want to rise up to the patriarchy of their fathers, who want to go out and work in the outside world. And we believe that Kali represents those values, and for all those reasons, we're very proud of it.
We thank the Prime Minister and all urge in the case for side opposition. The House calls from the leader of the opposition. Here.
The only unique necessity that opening government wants to tell you for having a religious idol as a feminist idol is that religion is one of the more approachable factors of culture, right? So the underlying premise of this is that a cultural icon is one that is uniquely available and accessible for everyone. Given this, who would we rather have as an icon for the feminist movement from side opening opposition? We would rather have a Sarojini Naidu, an Annie Besant. Notice how these are all definitely real and inclusive role models who unite Indian society in a more fresh form of culture. A culture of the anti-colonist movement, right? These are women who fought in the women's wing in leadership positions and mobilized large masses of women to free them from oppressive patriarchal systems, especially under the British that provided them double jeopardy. Notice how not only does this create access to the unique portion of Indian culture that is fundamentally anti-colonist and also completely inclusive, but is also fresh and relatable to all modern Indian women, right? This is the model that we're going to talk to you about. Flag this out. This will be Anubha's argument. So we have three arguments for you apart from this. All the rebuttal will be integrated into this. First, right, that it fragments Indian women. Kali essentially is a fringe Indian goddess who's prayed for only in specific Hindu regions in North India. That is to say, this has three problems of fragmentation. Firstly, it is cognitively dissonant even with the Indian perception of what ideal women are or what women perceive themselves to be in the first place, right? Like we think women are compared to Kali in society to shame them. This idea that rebels are called Bhadra Kalis, and like this is in direct clash with their argument about how Indian women can now call themselves Kali and find pride in it. We think rather in a realistic perception of Indian culture, Kali is seen as a symbol that is insulting to women, and it's seen as something that only the gods can do, that normal women should completely avoid. Second, we think it excludes other religions or other forms of cultural identity. We think the point at which Christian women, Muslim women who do not identify with this religion, given the sectarian nature of Indian community and the kind of religious hatred that exists, are only further isolated from the feminist movement when this happens. Not just these people, right? Even in terms of Hindu women, we think this is completely inaccessible for urban women, for example, who lead to feminist voices in multiple ways. Why do we need these urban women? Because these people are often the only ones who can go to rural areas and mobilize rural populations when the alternatives are white feminists or white NGOs that fund us, right? We think therefore, when you fundamentally isolate many vital parts or vital parts of the subscription that is required for the feminist movement, it's harmful. So thirdly, we think it's specifically harmful when the goddess Kali is taken as the role model. Why? Because it furthers the Dravidian Aryan divide. Right? At the point at which kings of the south are portrayed as demons in the north, kings of the south who southern people are named after, who brown people are named after in India, are portrayed as demons who were killed by gods and goddesses in Aryan culture. At the point at which in regions like Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, there are religious movements that pray for these so-called demons in the north. We think it's fundamentally harmful at the point at which a person who is hated in some other religious movements is romanticized as the feminist icon. We think that's harmful. So in three ways we've shown you that it fragments Indian women. Why is this harmful? Because often it is only in 2016 that Indian women are getting their first approach, their first vision of the feminist movement. At the point at which the icon that exposes them to this movement is so exclusive and segmenting them, we think it's harmful. Secondly, we think even from a woman's point of view, like even in the fringe niche group that Kali might be prayed for, still women aren't likely to subscribe to the feminist movement, right? Assuming that their target is these rural women or northern women who actually pray to Kali. So why? Three reasons. One, because the point at which Kali is seen as a symbolization of rape, right? When they talk to you about the story of how she killed the demon, you have to know that she went on to kill innocent people. Simply, like in that story, she went on to kill godly people just because she was mad and was unable to control it. What this means is that it's fundamentally opposing or contradicting to the kind of way Indian women grew, kind of culture that Indian women grow up in, right? They grow up in cultures that fetishize family, peace, caring, and Kali is a symbol that contradicts all of these problems, right? Therefore, we think it's conflicting to the perception of roles that Indian women often see for themselves. And sure, this is social condition that you might want to free them from, but at the point at which you ward them off in the very first place, you show them a symbol that they are so perversely likely to react towards. We think you only trap them in these very social conditions forever, at the point at which you cannot create more organic and less radical perceptions that they're more likely to associate with, which cause smaller periods of change, that cause actual change. But secondly, we think it's even misrepresentative of the feminist movement. It becomes this Indian version of burn your bras is feminist. Right? We think the point at which critique is likely to improve and interest is going to reduce, at the point at which feminism is fundamentally misrepresented as requiring dominance. Right? We think at the point at which Kali is seen as one who dominated over husbands, the narration of the feminist movement in a society that is largely alien to the feminist movement becomes one that you can only be feminist when you're not domestic, or when you oppose your family members and break the kinds of society that these women grow up with. Once again, if you want to release them from this social conditioning, it has to be a significantly less radical perception that you expose them to. I take the question forward.
In status quo, any powerful woman would continue to be called Kali in its negative connotation. Wouldn't it be better to reclaim and redefine this term like we did for the term slut to make measures like slut box?
Okay, so the point of us, the reason why it's different for Indian women to be called Kali and using Kali itself is because it's obvious that you're using Kali as an insult to Indian women, but when you embrace that very identity, it becomes that person itself, right? We think rather Sarojini and Naidu are people who cared for the poor, who had families, but at the same time they aggressively fought for the Indian freedom, are a better role model. Thirdly, we think it fundamentally alienates men from the feminist movement when Kali is used. Why? Because at the point which Indian society is patriarchal, we think firstly men physically control the freedom of movement of women, etc., which means that they can now clamp down on the ability of women to organize themselves or to go to feminist meetings in the rural panchayat, for example. But second, we think it's important for men to be supportive and be allies in a society so patriarchal. And at the point which you exclude them by making the first narrative of feminism that they see something that seems to oppose them, we think it's harmful, and you therefore ward off a large part of society that you want to join your feminism. Thirdly, we think you cannot evolve the fight to fight religion, right? We think women are not allowed in temples. They've said that they can't achieve salvation. Things like harmful perceptions of marriage and sex are things that are imposed by religion in Indian society. Therefore, the point which Kali is a symbol of apologism by religious individuals. When they simply say, no, we have Kali, we're obviously progressive, we think it further worsens the problem when you cannot question religion while at the same time embracing a religious code. Therefore, we would rather have a secular Indian feminist movement and include more women into it.
We thank the leader of the opposition and all to continue the case for the opening government. The House calls upon the Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm going to talk to you about three structures in my speech, right? First, on the idea about why the Indian context is necessarily different and how. Second, the idea of why there's a need for an icon in status quo and why Kali fits the bill. And third, what are the consequences that opening government is coming from this move, right? But let's deal with the issues put forward by opening opposition. Firstly, we'd like to point out that it's problematic when you propose a model or an alternative icon without elaborating on why, right? We don't think these work well when you push that word in on the yellow instead. But let's deal with what he did tell us, right? He thinks that Sarojini Naidu, who is the Rosa Parks, if I may, of India, he thinks that she's a fitting icon because she's balanced, right? Because her focus was never her religion, but rather her work, right? And we agree with that. We completely concede to that. But what is the particular value we see coming out of using a religious and cultural icon, right? That it forces you to question the very religious scriptures that tell you that women are supposed to be subversive, right? Sarojini Naidu doesn't do that. That's not an alternative. Second, they talk to you about the fragmentation of Indian women on three levels, right? They tell you first, normal women will not associate. Second, women of different religions will not associate. And third, urban women will not associate. We disagree on one fundamental argument, right, which Ritvik spoke about. The crux of Indian feminism is the idea that there's unity in diversity. The idea that you can have different lived experiences, you can have different religions, but at the same time you're fighting for one common cause, right? That's the entire crux of what Indian feminism revolves around. And this answers the very position we're trying to take, right? Because what did Ritvik tell? What he told you is that we concede that people of different religions like Christianity and Islam will not hold Kali as holy as Hindu women. But what they can still recognize is that she espouses a certain value that is in line with what the feminist movement wants to push forward, right? Secondly, on the idea that urban women won't really associate, right? We disagree with that. We think that urban women still understand the value of religion in India. I'm educated, at the same time I'm extremely theist, right? We think that urban women, simply by virtue of educated, aren't fragmented and alienated just on virtue of that, right? But third, he talks to you about this typical historical argument about how the southern descent people are misportrayed, right? We completely agree with that. We tell you that there's a need for reinterpretation. There's a need for reclaiming, and it starts here, right? We think, and the second rebuttal that we have to his entire point about how certain men aren't portrayed well in Kali's story is the idea that the movement will push forward her values, right? When Wonder Woman is made the UN Goodwill Ambassador, it's not her story that is pushed forward. It's what she stands for, right? That's what you have to take away from our case. It's not a rebuttal that stands, right? Third, he tells you that, and this is the typical logical fallacy that every misogynist on the planet has, right? The minute you push forward a feminist narrative, you will have men starting to hate feminists. You will have men who think that feminists are trying to dominate over it, right? I have one simple rebuttal to this. The feminist movement in India will never abandon the basic principle and tenet of feminism, that is equality for both genders, right? We don't think that the feminist movement will ever advocate Kali to the extent that they say women need to go kill husbands or who would mistreat them, right? Or women need to act disproportionately to people who abuse them, right? We think that's man-hating, that's separate from feminism, that's not something that's within the paradigm of those debates. His arguments about domination and the perception of man-hating don't stand, because simultaneously you can push for a strong, independent woman who doesn't act disproportionately, who stands up for her rights, but doesn't go so as to antagonize the other gender, right? I'm going to talk to you about three things. First, why is the Indian context different? The Indian context is different because Indians utilize their religious scriptures to bolster their convictions, right? The idea that the Corinthians tell you that women should stay silent. The idea that in the Manusmriti says that a woman who stays out too late or who doesn't obey her husband is typically and terribly bad, right? This is what has pushed patriarchal constructs and consolidated them over the years. What is the consequence of this move? The consequence of this move is that these patriarchal constructs are questioned now, right? Because people who follow these religious scriptures, who told their daughters you cannot go out because your religion tells you not to do it, now have to reconcile the idea of a Durga or a Kali telling daughters to be strong, right? The minute you reinterpret or redefine what Kali stands for and utilize her as an icon, those parents and those men are forced to think and rationalize whether Kali would have done the same, whether their religion is really telling them that women are subversive. This is why the Indian context is distinct in this debate. It's not sufficient for them to not categorize that, right? But more importantly, right, the second thing that we'd like to talk to you about, the idea of what values an icon should espouse, right? We think in an ideal world, you'd love to have a secular icon who everyone can associate with, right? But we don't see that, and especially we don't see that happening in India. Mr. Speaker, India is a country that's rich in its diversity, but it's also complicated in its diversity. It's near impossible to find an icon that appeals to everyone and at the same time is forceful enough, right? So what did we tell you? We think that the value that an icon stands for can still be imbibed by people who don't belong to that religion, right? We think that the value or characteristics that an icon necessarily needs to have is to push forward the narrative that the movement stands for. That's the only characteristic that is vital in this debate. We think Kali does that, right? Ritvik went into great length to explain to you why Kali is the strong woman, why she's brilliant. I'll further that. Ajita.
Rihanna is an ethnic minority that has achieved great success in the musical world. Do you consider her a role model for women?
Mr. Speaker, we completely agree, right? But that woman will never break down the religious constructs and the basis and foundations of Indian society, right? She might be a great aspiration to other women to stand above their levels and achieve something in life. But on a very basic level, that woman will never be able to force men to question their own demands, right? If that's going to be the argument from both sides of the law, they can't win this debate, right? They have to prove to you why it's necessarily not going to happen that people will question their scriptures, right? Because let's understand this. Feminism is about equality, but more importantly, the best method to push forward this principle is engagement. When you engage with people on their own home ground, right? When you tell them why their religion is necessarily wrong in this manner, or rather tell them that their religion actually says this, that's when you truly make change on the ground, right? What if I told you in my 7 minutes of speaking, I've explained to you why the Indian context is different, we have to debate. Within that, we've explained to you why Kali, though a Hindu goddess, is the value that needs to be pushed forward as a strong woman who will not stand up to abuse. And we've also told you why the burden on them is to show you that religious scriptures will be broken down in both paradigms. We're extremely proud to do this.
We thank the Deputy Prime Minister and all close the case of the opening opposition for top half at all. We call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition here.
Mr. Speaker, the opening government wishes to co-opt religious patriarchal structures in which men have sole authority to decide religious interpretations, especially in a sectarian country like India, where people are extremely defensive of their religious identity, and to the extent that you use religious symbols, that is going to the backlash or the furor regarding co-opting that symbol is going to drown out any other sort of message that you're trying to deliver, especially in countries like India. Unnati comes up and says that this is feminism, that feminists should be more rebellious, feminists should be firebrand feminists. This is the essential problem with their characterization, that you have such a myopic view of feminism to the extent that you disenfranchise women who don't want to be this rebellious, especially in countries like India, where there are many housewives who do ascribe to household like homely values, who do ascribe to being good wives, good mothers, and they are willing to make this trade-off to the extent that you co-opt a religious symbol to create this firebrand feminist. You have given us no analysis to tell us that why will these housewives who have been brought up in a patriarchal setup and who ascribe to these values are suddenly going to view themselves in a different light just by virtue of espousing a religious icon, which in itself we don't think is going to succeed. Does Kali deal with the fact that menstruating women should be allowed into temples? No. Does Kali deal with the fact that celibacy is not equivalent to the character of a woman? No. What does Kali do? Kali essentially does what all Indian apologists do. Kali says that in India we worship goddesses and that is equivalent to respecting women. Because see, in our religious texts, not taken, we have had extremely rebellious, extremely good women, and this pushes under the carpet all discourse related to issues that religion in itself is uncomfortable with. That's the harm, right? When you co-opt a religious structure to deal with nuances like menstruation, to deal with nuances like celibacy, religious structures or religious interpretation or texts are often inadequate in doing so because they themselves are like uncomfortable in dealing with such issues. So at best what you do is that you use Kali as the firebrand feminist, which we don't think is going to work for two reasons. Who has religious authority over the interpretation of text? Traditionally Hindu priests. What does Hinduism say? Are there women priests? Hardly any women priests in Hinduism, Mr. Speaker. Most interpretation is done by men. And most Indian women see Kali as a celibate Hindu goddess who calmed down after her husband intervened. And this is the crux of the case, right? At the end of the day, intervention by a man was what allowed her to calm down eventually. And this is the problem. If feminists start co-opting religious symbols, religious icons like Kali, these are the same feminists who are maybe not virgins. These are the same feminists who are pushing for rights of women to enter temples when they are menstruating. What is the response going to be? It's hardly going to be like, look, a new interpretation of Kali has happened. The many conservative women in India who are extremely religious themselves will be appalled at the idea of these women because there is divide within the feminist movement in India itself. There is divide between the conservative women, there is divide between the modern women, and the conservative women do not ascribe to the feminist movement because they think that their religious identity or their household identity is more important. So, what is likely to going to be? The divide between the conservative women and the modern women is likely to be entrenched to the extent that they see that because you co-opting Kali amounts to perversion of religious identity, which they hold very dear to themselves. So, if you want them to engage with the feminist movement by associating, the way they see it, defiling their goddess, it's hardly going to happen, and any discourse that you want within the feminist movement itself is not going to be true. And secondly, this legitimizes the apologist attitude that Indians usually have, that we have had many divine women who are strong, and this is the argument you use to legitimize religious interference in feminism itself, that look, work within our paradigm, push for rights within our paradigm, which is essentially patriarchal in nature. So at best this leads to it leads to minor concessions like, look, we'll allow you to enter in certain levels, but the overarching narrative that religion mostly is patriarchal by nature is taken down and is never dealt with. But more importantly, Kali saved the day. No, I've dealt with that. But more importantly, icon does not need to be ideal, it espouses certain values, what they say. We agree to that, right? But why do we want living icons? Why? Because they can be challenged. Even if they're talking about Wonder Women, they can be challenged because you do not have any sort of religious allegiance to it, so you won't think like it's not a clash of against the divine authority of a goddess, right? So it's easier to challenge Wonder Woman, which is why you scrutinize Batman, you scrutinize Superman, you scrutinize Wonder Woman, and that's possible. We think that feminist icons should be under public scrutiny so that they themselves understand the kind of rights that they're badgering for. Go.
Be comparative. Give us an icon who deals with menstruation, celibacy, education. How are you going to break the religious construct with such an icon? Be comparative.
Mr. Speaker, we are fine with using Emma Watson or Rihanna or any other existing women. There are plenty of women who push for such rights within the current paradigm. We don't see why we should co-opt the religious model, which can turn the tide against us. But more importantly, we have taken one from you. Now, it doesn't appeal to the sense of homely, like we've already told you that it doesn't appeal to the sense of homely Hindu women. But what kind of icons should be used? Definitely not icons which legitimize the fact that if the society has done something wrong to you, you are fair, like you are justified in using excessive violence or excessive vindication against them. The part of the Kali story that they conveniently left out was after she killed Rakht Beach, she started going after her own kith and kin, after the good people, after the devas, which is why Shiva had to intervene to calm her down. What we essentially say is that this legitimizes the sort of rhetoric that it's okay to act with overt violence or like with overt, aggression against men. How this is harmful is that when you act with overt aggression, it sets men on the back foot as well. So if you're badgering or like you're demanding equality in the right, where you are essentially interacting with the other half of the gender, you need to be constructive. You need not to be apologetic, you not to be pacifist, but to be reasonable, not be overly aggressive, because this often any engagement, which is the classic problem why like firebrand feminism is becoming isolated and like mostly ineffective in today's scenario, because there is no engagement on any policy level, there is no engagement on any governmental level. We are trying to impact structural changes and bring about structural changes in favor of women. This extreme sense of, and also in the future generation, we see a rising brand of women who have the sense of entitlement that any sort of act against them warrants a disproportionate response just by virtue of the fact that they belong to the gender called women. And this is not true, right? Because proportionality or proportional response is very important in any case, like irrespective of whether you have been oppressed or not. The people who have been oppressed cannot become oppressors in the future. We have told you how it will lead to fragmentation of the feminist movement. We have told you how it will lead to like discourage discourse among between men and women. We have told you why you shouldn't go out into religious symbols, and for all these reasons, we're extremely proud to propose.
We thank the speaker, and in order to open the back half of the debate, I'll call upon the member of
Speaker, we think that in the status quo, when the Indian feminist movement is suffering because Indian women can't relate to it, because opting for the Indian feminist movement is for them they have to choose either between their religious identity or their identity as a feminist. That in such a scenario, having Kali as a feminist icon is extremely good for the Indian feminist movement. Right? Why do I say that it's a trade-off, that it's a choice that women have to make between their religious identity and their identity as a feminist? Right? It's because right now the Indian feminists are seen as people who have borrowed like Western ideals and are taking like this idea from others, right? Because they're not relatable to us, right? Because the things that they're talking about are not like related to our culture, and the things that they're talking about are not related to us, and they've just been influenced by outside sources, right? Because like when my mother tells me that you've learned all this stuff from the internet and you're forgetting your own culture, you're forgetting like where your ancestors come from, not now, and you're forgetting like what you're taking, what like stuff that we are teaching you, and you're being influenced by others, is when I have to like choose between, is when I have a conflict in my mind about whether about what I hold more important, right? Whether I hold my these ideas as a feminist that I consider important, or whether I consider my religious identity, the one that my family is talking about, whether I find that important. When the Indian feminist movement takes the Kali, who isn't like a minor figure in Indian mythology, as opposition was saying. She is like isn't one of those like many gods that we've forgotten about. She is still has a festival like dedicated to her, right? When the Indian feminist movement picks this one particular person, one particular icon, it becomes like easier for it shows that they like are rooted in our own culture, right? What what opposition was talking about, that we need is that we don't want to have a feminist icon from within the confines of religion, because we think that religion is patriarchal, right? But we think that that is where you're able to bring about the most amount of change, right? When you can take already existing structures and bring about change. Because right now right now the women don't follow, aren't able to relate to the feminist movement right now, and it struggles because of that. So other things that opposition said about it being like in legitimizing overly aggressive behavior, right? When the current situation is so bad that if I show like any amount of aggression in the classroom, my teacher has to like tell me that has to pass the comment that this sort of thing is not suitable in a girl. How come you're doing this? I don't expect this sort of thing from a girl. In such a situation where this is so deep rooted and so pervasive, we don't think that immediately it's going to like it's going to lead to a situation where such an escalation would happen that it will go to the a really next level, right? Yes.
Tell us that everyone likes Kali, that a large part of the majority of Indian society prays to Kali and aspires to be her, right? Then why is it that also these very individuals are the ones entrenching the patriarchy?
Right. So we think that because we don't right now, Kali isn't portrayed as someone who's you can have these ideals, because there is no aggressive showing by the people that being aggressive is fine for a woman to do, right? That you don't always have to be meek and submissive, and you can solve your problems using aggression, right? We don't think that happens in the current scenario, right? So we think that this is extremely good for the Indian feminist movement, in that it makes it shows that they aren't just makes them more relatable to women, right? Secondly, talking about how they said that men will be disenfranchised from the Indian feminist movement, but if we divorce, right? We don't think so, because they have already co-opted into religion, right? Because they are already a part of this, and they already they are part of the system which prays to Kali, right? So in this scenario where they've already a part of this, and you show that you're worshipping, and what the Indian feminists will do is harp upon these particular qualities of Kali, is when you when you're able to include them as well into your movement, right? Closing POI.
Right. So, why is it more relatable to believe in a mythical goddess as opposed to household traditions like touching your husband's feet or covering your head?
Because we think that all these are still propagated by religion, right? Because Indian mythology has so many examples of goddesses who are the perfect wife, right? Because Indian mythology has way many more examples of people who are Sita and all these other goddesses who are the ideal wife, and who have the ideal meek and submissive qualities that the patriarchy tries to propagate. Right? We see Kali as this one icon who is very rare, and is this one in Indian mythology, and against the ideas that the patriarchy is trying to propose, right? We think that when the Indian feminist movement argues about these are the qualities that we see in Kali, and we think that this is important for women to have, is that and obviously they won't be propagating things such as going mad and having no reason and still showing aggression, as the fact that they talked about Kali afterwards, after that whole incident with the Rakshas, is that we don't think that when the Indian feminist movement isn't talking about is specifically saying that sort of thing is not what we propose, is when it will become is when people can realize that the fact that the ideas that they're trying to promote are these ones. So we on the grounds that the Indian feminist movement can be more relatable and to the people by this book, we think
So here, and in all those open the case for the closing the commission, the House corresponding member of the opposition will
Mr. Speaker, the Indian feminist movement exists on a spectrum. On one hand, we have the urban women trying to legislate for change, trying to get better maternity leave, trying to get more empowerment in the corporate area. On the other hand, we have the rural woman, right, who's suffering huge amounts of domestic abuse, barely getting educated. And we're going to move a little away from the kind of largely religious contextualization that exists in the debate, and we're going to, as closing opposition, oppose the existence of Kali as a feminist icon because A, she espouses the idea of female superiority, which we think is extremely detrimental to all of the urban females trying to talk about how feminism is about equality and they're not feminazis. And B, on the second level, how Kali legitimizes female violence or violence in general, and how this is extremely pervasive to a vast majority of rural women who have to deal with this abuse on a day-to-day level. And that's going to be the extension from closing opposition. But first, let's deal with the idea on whether or not you can decouple a role model into different facets and choose to idealize one facet and not choose to idealize the other, right? And this is why my Rihanna POI is extremely important, because even though we think she's achieved great amount of success as an ethnic minority female, we think the fact that she chose to stay in an abusive relationship, the fact that she was beaten up, also allowed a lot of rhetoric in terms of like even a successful woman can be beaten up, or it's okay to be beaten up by your husband or your boyfriend, right? So we think it's important to realize that in terms of how role models influence both the followers as well as the opposers of the feminist movement, we can't decouple all of the ideals of that role model and only choose to follow one, because at all points of time the naysayers are going to emphasize what is inherently the worst characteristic of your role model and talk about why that is in fact a bad thing, right? So the kind of decoupling that exists on government isn't really possible. So we understand that we don't understand how you can show that women aren't unreasonably aggressive when at the same time you propagate the aggressiveness in a certain sense with Kali, right? So I think that's something that government should lose it out on majorly. But let's talk about the extension coming from closing opposition before I get into why they don't break down the links to religion and patriarchy, right? First on the extension, on the idea of how this pervasively harms the urban majority of women in India, right? What does the urban woman want in India? Today we're in a stage where we are barely breaking into the glass ceiling in the corporate world, right? We're legislating for change, and very recently we had a bill passed which extended the maternity leave of women from 3 months in India to 6 months in India, right? And the largest opposition to all of this change, whether it is through legislature or through policy making in the corporate world, is the idea that women are asking for something that's unreasonable. Women are asking for special privilege. Women are trying to be feminazis, but they're trying to show themselves as superior and not really talking about equality, right? We think this is, in the educated world, the greatest opposition that we do have towards the idea of feminism. And we think it's extremely problematic when we have depictions of Kali going ahead and stamping the face or stamping the body of her husband or consort, right? Because that's the exact kind of rhetoric that the male naysayers or the anti-feminists use against the feminists, right? The fact that you are trying to ask for something that's unreasonable and which makes all the other men, the vast majority whose support we're trying to wipe, not only in terms of policy change, in terms of legislature change, we think they're afraid to speak out the minute we become super aggressive, right? Because that's the exact kind of rhetoric that the female the so-called female feminazis or female superiors are afraid of propagating, and I think this greatly harms the kind of policy change we want for the urban woman, right? But let's talk about the rural woman. I think this is where our extension is particularly permanent. We think Kali celebrates the idea of violence. She celebrates the idea of being able to kill people or put them down or act aggressively, right? And we think the rural population of India is one that's deeply unempowered, right? The ones that have access to very little legal resources, very little resources in terms of having counseling or in terms of having welfare, right? At this point in time, when they're economically dependent on their husbands, we think ideas of abuse, of aggression, of violence is something that affects them on a very deep and intimate level, right? And we think it's extremely important the feminists have a categorically explicit and non-negotiable stance against all rape. We don't have any laws against like we have very minimal laws against marital abuse. And we think a lot of this is impossible to regulate because we can't go into the households of each individual couple and regulate these kinds of abuse, right? Which is extremely important towards the idea of us trying to undo the kind of systematic oppression that these women face and have a cohesive but non-negotiable stance against violence. I'll take opening.
Domestic violence affects both rural and urban women. Why not push a narrative that says women should fight a husband who rapes them?
Alright, see this is your problem, right? At the point of time you endorse violence because you're like at the point, like, because the solution to the problem right now is it's not that men are beating up women and now women should go ahead and beat up men, right? Because A, that's not going to work because most women unfortunately are physically weaker than men. We don't see that as a feasible solution in any way, but we don't even know that's a solution that we want to promote, right? We don't want to promote a solution in which the answer to violence is more violence. We want to promote a solution where we're against violence. It's harder to take a principled stance against violence when your answer to violence is another form of violence or a more aggressive form of violence, right? And this is why we think that it's important that we don't allow for Kali to become the violent and superior symbol that she is in today's contextualization, right? But let's talk about why Gov Bench loses its debate, right? Because all of what Gov Bench has said is in terms of having the value of this goddess as a role model to like undo the kind of patriarchy that exists in religion. But at no point of time have they proved the links about how this is now a more relatable or more dominant narrative than one that exists, right? Because we need to realize at the point of time that you have so many household practices and so many deities that are submissive, like in terms of like touching the feet of the male god, in terms of covering their heads, in terms of like listening to their husband, in terms of ideas like sati, we don't know how this one narrative is going to become dominant. Because at the end of the day, we tell you the idea of Kali is not new. She's existed for a very long period of time. We don't know what are the change mechanisms you are going to adopt to create a new narrative around it. Given that we also think like the dominant groups who create these narratives are largely the people who control the religious proceedings in these households themselves, which are generally the males, right? So we're unable to reconcile the idea that you're now somehow going to like de-link the idea of patriarchy by going ahead and just having like a theoretical idea of recharacterizing the narrative. From side closing opposition, we're very happy to say, because we don't endorse the idea of female superiority and the idea of violence is extremely pervasive to the urban poor, extremely tribal.
We thank the member of the opposition in order to conclude the government. Then the House consequently government to appear here.
Mr. Speaker, we think the major problem with Indian feminist movement today is because most Indians think that it's actually Western feminism movement that's just happening in India, right? We think that is a fundamental reason feminist movement is not going somewhere. Yeah, sure, it's because there's a difference between urban and rural. Yeah, sure, it's because there's a difference between Hinduism and Muslim. But the main reason that this is happening is because when people are fighting for things that are seen as Western ideas and Western goals, when the feminist movement in India is seen as something that is isolated from India itself, that is when women think that it is not something that they have to care about, right? That is when women in the rural places think that this is not something that I have to care about, this is something that's happening in another country and I don't really care, right? Now, why does this idea of promoting Kali as a feminist icon bring things back to India, right? So we accept that India is one of the most religious countries in the world, right? We accept that religion is something so important to most Indians as compared to every other country in the world. And we accept that Hinduism is a religion that is so important in India, right? So when Kali, who is not only a Hindu goddess, but an Indian Hindu goddess is promoted, then that is when women all over India see that the feminist movement is actually endorsing someone who's an Indian, who's actually keeping in mind their intersectionality between their gender identity and their religious identity, right? When we're not just as the opposition seems to be doing, when we're not just like ushering off religion as something patriarchal, that is when women are going to start thinking, right? Because when you just tell them, look, religion is patriarchal, so get away with it, that's not going to happen because religion is something so important to women. But alternatively, when you tell them, look, even your religion wants women to be high, even your religion wants women to be successful, right? That is what we are trying to tell them with this, right? We are not trying to get away with religion by saying it's patriarchal. We are trying to give this opinion that religion in itself can be feministic, that religion in itself can be something that promotes female rights, right? So
So, like, we've heard sufficient analysis on our side. We have told you why Kali, right? We have told you that she's aggressive, and we have a lot has been contested on the fact that she also is violent. She also is a symbol of rage and stuff. But let me tell you, there's no icon in feminism that's absolutely perfect, right? When you have Rihanna, you have the abuse. When you have Emma Watson, you have the fact that she like wears makeup, she wears dresses, right? There's a lot of feminists who are against that. For every feminist icon, there's a problem that is anti-feministic seen within that icon, right? Now, unless the opposition group can come and tell me one feminist icon who she thinks is perfect and who she thinks that there's nothing against, then you can't say that this is the problem, right? Because every feminist icon is going to have something that is wrong with them, right? And in this situation, why do we think that Kali's is not a problem, right? So we tell you this, right? Never before has aggression, never before has dominance in women been seen as a good thing, right? From religion to school to families to everywhere have people been promoting women to be submissive, right? Therefore, the idea that we promote Kali and emphasize and endorse her personality as a really aggressive woman, as a really dominant woman, as a woman who fights for what she wants, that is when we bring in this idea that that is a desirable quality seen in women, right? Because we don't think if women see Kali, they are going to try to become exactly like her, right? We think that this just brings an idea in the minds of women that why is the feminist movement endorsing someone who I completely disagree with? Maybe that's the right way to go. Maybe that's the right position to take, right? We think that idea, that slight doubt that, wait, maybe being submissive is not the way after all, opposing to everything that patriarchy has constantly been teaching women is the right thing to do, right? And we think that opposing women being submissive all the time, promoting violence isn't something that they're going to learn, right? You're not going to see Kali as like a feminist icon and suddenly start being violent against your husband, right? We think that all this teaches you is that women can defend themselves and women can fight back even if violence is the way to do it, right? We believe that in a world where women are being constantly victims of domestic violence, that it is okay, because we think that as long as women get the idea that they're strong enough to fight back, that is a much more important narrative, and we completely agree that should be the narrative given, and we think only Kali can give this narrative. Yes.
That is, if you agree that religion is so vastly constructive and powerful in India, why is the perception of Kali generated by a nascent feminist movement going to be effectively more effective than such a massive religious movement?
Okay, right. So the thing is this, right? So the idea so far has been that religion wants women to be submissive, and that religion wants women to just like take all this stuff, right? That religion wants to promote this patriarchal society, right? So we think that though you come and say that Kali isn't that famous, and that all people don't agree with Kali, they're going to see her personality, right? Because they're not necessarily going to identify her as a Hindu, but they're going to identify her personality, and we think that is why this is helpful, right? So let's come to a few rebuttals, right? So the main point is, why do we need to use the religious aspect to make this movement? Because a lot of people have this submissive idea, because religion, in a lot of ways, promotes women to be submissive, right? When you come and tell us that religion mandates something, well, we tell you that religion is already mandating women to be submissive, right? And the only way to fight religion mandating women to be submissive is for religion to ask women to not be submissive, right? Because when you say that religion is so powerful, in the same way that we think that the only thing that can fight religion is religion, right? So a religious woman is going to believe that she has to listen to her husband, she has to follow those oppressive rituals no matter what the feminist movement tells, right? So the only way to let them know that it's okay is to fight this with religion by saying even your religion doesn't agree with this, right? When they think it's in the best interest of their religion to actually go ahead and be aggressive, to actually go ahead and fight for themselves, that is when they're going to find this okay, right? And when you come and tell us that men will be against it, well, we tell you that any point of time where you tell women to be dominant, and any point of time where you tell women to be assertive, men are going to be against it, right? In the same way that we tell you that women are not suddenly going to become violent, yeah, there might be a little bit of backlash, right? But we think that the idea that this imparts in women that they can fight back, that they can be aggressive, and that it is something that is very innate nature. They don't have to always contrast that with the religious identity. Is so much more important than anything else. Yes. How do you temper the narrative in your paradigm where you ask women to be equal but not too superior, and be violent but not too violent as Kali? Right, so that's what happens when you endorse someone, right? When you endorse someone, you don't just say, look, this person is perfect, can everyone be like her? You talk about the ideas, the qualities you like about her, right? When you talk about Kali, when you're endorsing her, you write articles about why you think she's good. You portray her in a picture that you try to admire, right? You try to make women admire them, right? And that's what happens when you, as a feminist movement, endorse, right? When you, as a feminist movement, endorse, you tell people, look, this is what we like about Kali, and this is what we think that women can try to be like. This is what we think is acceptable in our society, right? So, as a feminist movement, you're not going to go ahead and say, look, I think all women should just wear skulls of the men they've killed. You're not going to say that, because that's what happens when you endorse someone, right? You endorse the qualities that you think are good. That's something that we think that can be done, right? So let's consider this, right? So that is what we tell you. What have we told you, right? We have told you that, look, the only way to fight this religious narrative that already exists, that women have to be submissive, is to change the idea about religion itself, right? Because religion is something that people identify so much with. Religion is something that people are scared to go against, and therefore, to fight this religious idea that women have to be submissive, we need to tell them that, look, according to your religion, it is not that bad, right? We tell you that this is the way to bring feminism back to India, which is something that's so important, because the major objective here is to do that, because that is one of the main reasons the feminist movement in India has lost its momentum, and therefore we think we will fail.
Thank the government whip, and in order to conclude the opposition bench in the debate of the Holy House, calls upon the opposition with actually not allowed to.
Sorry.
So, Speaker, there are two broad clashes in this debate, right? This debate has been about A, do we need a goddess or someone with a religious connection as a role model? And B, do we really need Kali, particularly, right? So on the first class, do we really need a goddess as a role model? OG comes and tells you, Mr. Speaker, icons need not be like perfect, ideal women. They can be flawed. It's okay for them to not be like perfect or ideal. It's okay for not everyone to associate with them. However, this isn't about me or flaws, right? This is about them and their story representing something that is contrary to the very basic principles of feminism, right? This is about how the violence that Kali espouses and the superiority that Kali espouses are both contrary to the very basic principles of feminism, of equality, and achieving this through non-violence. In fact, historically, feminists have condemned violence and structural violence used by patriarchy to subordinate them. How then are we suddenly supporting Kali, right? They also tell you how Indian feminist movement in particular espouses unity and diversity, and like everybody is okay with, and women, there is a particular need for women to accept feminism in their own cultural context. I can tell you that is not true. In fact, when there are differences in how people perceive movements like feminism, this leads to conflicts, right? Because these differences are used to isolate and polarize people, and then this is what naysayers use to then put down your movement, and this is what naysayers then finally end up using to reduce the legitimacy of your movement. So we disagree on that count as well, right? However, the very base of their case, right, it's contingent on the fact that people revere their gods and people are really like deeply connected to their gods. Hence, if the feminist movement suddenly espouses Kali, and people will then suddenly see all her feminist qualities, and therefore it is suddenly good for Indian women. Like, they make all those jumps in a huge leap, right? However, it's contingent on the belief that there's a personal belief in your God. The point at which a large majority of women do not, and large majority of Indians, such as Muslims, such as even the lower castes within Hinduism, who have completely different gods, do not really pray to Kali, and Kali would only be, prayed to by a certain people living in the eastern side of India. The point at which a lot of people do not harbor this conviction, this violation, Kali as a feminist icon becomes useless, right? Then they come and tell you, oh no, this can be used to counter the patriarchy that exists within religion, right? What we'll somehow do is, since Hinduism has been, what people will now do is interpret this to be a good thing, that oh, there's feminine women who are good within Hinduism too, right? We tell you that this will not happen, right? Since Kali gains her legitimacy from Hinduism as an icon, and Hinduism itself is a very patriarchal religion, It comes from where practices like sati, notions of how women should stay within the household, are deeply ingrained, and also how religious interpretation is controlled by men in the current Indian society. We do not see any of those benefits accruing. Right? It will act. The idea that one goddess can be used to counter layers and layers, years and years of scriptures and interpretation that had rendered women's status in Hindu households, in the Indian households, at a lower pedestal than men is absurd, right? Because think about this, right? Goddesses have been revered in Hinduism for years. Every year we have Durga Puja. Every year we have festivals for goddesses. For years and years, there are periods in the year where goddesses are prayed to, and people do various things, observe various rituals. However, none of the benefits that they have been talking about have ever happened. So they have not proved to you the causal link between them adopting Kali as a feminist icon and suddenly all their benefits happening, right? Because not taken right now. No, not taken right now. What really happens? Because what happens, because Kali is a goddess, she is viewed as an exception. Her actions are viewed as something that are not necessarily to be imbibed by Indian women in their households, or something, and given by their own standards, right? When this demon was demonizing the whole world, terrorizing the whole world, and that was an exceptional situation when this happened. That is not going to translate to women suddenly becoming, oh, listen, you cannot beat me inside my own house. That's not going to happen, because that has been structurally imbibed in them. That they have been told that is normal, and that's not something out of the norm. So what they're telling you about will not happen right now. No, not taken right now. This brings me to even within Hinduism, right? You're talking even within Hinduism, do we really need Kali? Will it really empower women? They tell you, oh no, we can pick and choose between like the good and bad values of Kali, right? We can decouple the values. We tell you, no, how are you doing this? You cannot control the interpretation that people are going to make of your symbol and her story, because her story is going to be out there, right? It's not going to be up to you to tell people, oh no, look, we picked a symbol Kali, these are her good qualities, please follow them. Oh, these are her bad qualities, please ignore them. You're not going to be able to do that. People are going to have their own interpretations. It's very unlikely that the stuff we are talking about will happen, right? So, on that count, they lose. They tell you, oh no, it can be interpreted in a way that would uplift women's status in society, right? Show how women can rise to the occasion and take down evil in Hindu society. We tell you, even if in the off chance that happens, the harms that Achita spoke to you about, the harms that the structural problems of superiority and violence, right? How those conflict with the very basic principles of feminism. We think that's even more problematic, because then your feminist movement itself becomes very segmented, right? It's all the problems of alienation that you spoke about. The urban women will not connect with it. Anybody who knows the most basic things about feminism will not recognize this, and that will lead to problems. And we don't agree, right? They tell you a jarring narrative of Kali with her violent methods, as opposed to the narrative of the docile Indian women, is really necessary right now. We tell you, no, that is not true. We tell you, no, that is not. That is unnecessary. You in fact need something that's palatable, like Achita spoke to you, and something that will be accepted by people, something that seems like the next logical step in the consequence of things. And they tell you feminism is viewed as a Western construct, and people don't really connect with feminism. And suddenly the solution to that is taking a goddess and making her a feminist icon, assuming people will associate with mythological creatures now. We told you on side opposition that no, there are enough real life Indian women who've done so well, who've beat patriarchal structures and are much better options for becoming feminist icons. Like Indra Lohi, the CEO, like the person who's the current CEO of ICICI Bank, the largest bank in India, I forget her name, I'm sorry. So, which tells you that which basically tells you that there's enough in status quo to take care of the problems of Indian feminism. Thank you, we are very proud.
We thank all speakers for those honest